Hello, I'm James Okerson. I'm excited to announce the release of my new text, Teaching Tenets of Faith in Worship. It's my belief that we're being bombarded each day by a host of media that tell us what we should believe and what we shouldn't, and it gets confusing. Probably the last time that any of us have had a methodical walk through our faith and the elements, the tenets, if you will, was when we were preparing for baptism or confirmation, catechism, depending on our denomination. And that's a long time for many of us, and we get confused. Through the years, things begin to creep in, inveigle themselves into our thinking. And it's possible that Jesus wouldn't recognize the faith we hold from what he was preaching and teaching and giving an example of. What this is a very practical reference guide for setting up a whole worship series on faith. Now, a person could dip into it and do several items of it, or do the whole thing. 24 chapters in practical method. It contains an introduction that is really a thesis statement about what the worship day would be about. It provides suggested preaching points, and the four typical and classic scripture references: Old Testament, Psalm, Gospel, and then New Testament. So for that, it's a lectionary that's focused on tenets of faith. Very much like the seasonal calendar of lectionary series, this would focus in on that. I used it in my congregation during ordinary time, so spring, summer, and fall, to provide that walkthrough of what do we believe. What you'll find in each chapter then are those things I mentioned, and those were aimed for the preacher. But also there are resources listed that a person can get more information about. There are songs, hymns recommended. There are words for worship that can be very helpful in framing how we're going to convey the faith. Don't want to just hammer on a faith line in sermon. We want to create the whole worship setting to convey toward that way. So there's call to worship, confession, absolution, there's offertory prayers, and there's benediction. Those are offered. Not all of us in our denominational backdrops use all of those words, but these can help us as we care to incorporate them into our worship setting. On the idea of this bombardment of what we receive every day in the media, Christian Smith, about a decade ago now, found that youth, believers of youth, were finding that their definition of the Christian faith was to be moral, be therapeutic, and be a deist. What does that mean? That meant be a good guy, do nice things. If it's good for you, then it must be good theology. And if you believe in a God, that's sufficient to please Christ. Well, that is quite a morphed sense of what the historic Christian faith is. And so we as preachers, teachers, worship leaders need to provide the kind of tools that the average parishioner can use to judge what they're receiving every day. They need guideposts. Why do we have continuing education in the workplace? Not only teachers have continuing education, those of us in other workplaces. I received countless, it must be 6, 7, 8 times of refreshers on doing CPR. Why did I need that many? It was so that I would be ready at the time of emergency to save someone's life and not have to worry about, do I clear the airway, do I breathe first, do I pound first? Of course, pound isn't the right word, but it's so that we have both cognitive and muscle memory to help us when we need it. That's not so different then. of where we are in needing to understand our faith and separate it perhaps from what we hear every day. I pray that this can be a blessing for the preacher amongst you and for the worship leader amongst you. God bless as you prepare this week's worship time, and make what you find in this text fit your hermeneutical setting. Make it fit you. Adapt it to your place of worship. God bless.